today's episode, I'm joined by Teresa Park. She's a personal injury with our law firm and also handles employment law matters. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you for having me.
Can you give a brief introduction of yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So I completed my law degree at Osgoode Hall Law School, and then I had the opportunity to article at a really great insurance defense boutique firm. I also worked there for another year. Then I practiced some employment law, and I'm here.
An interesting thing is that you were doing insurance defense. And for people that don't know what that means you were actually defending claims for money arising out of car accidents, slip and fall accidents, any sort of injury claim, right?
Absolutely. So the insurance companies would hire our firm, and I would be representing them.
So how did you find the transition from being a defense lawyer to now representing people who are injured or wrongfully terminated?
The shift was pretty seamless, I must say. It is very different. The structure that we have when you work for an insurance company, they have their own internal deadlines, they have their own internal needs for opinions, and the structure is completely different than when you are a personal injury lawyer, because that means you have a free range of your files. You get to be as creative as you want and can be. You're able to really dig deep into the file, unlike when you're working insurance defense, because you have all these quotas that you have to meet. It's more about churning the numbers out as opposed to here's a real person who's hurt and we want to help them because there's compassion there. And I'm seeing these people eye to eye and they're coming to me for help. Whereas with insurance defense, the adjusters have the control.
And we share that in common, that we both started as insurance defense lawyers. I've always had the view that that's an advantage for a plaintiff's lawyer, for someone representing an injured person. What's your view on that? Do you think that gives you an advantage?
Absolutely. It is a leverage that you can't purchase. There's no book you can read to have this kind of advantage. You essentially have an insider view on how insurance companies determine if they want to fight a file, right? If they want to take it to a hearing, how much settlement they're going to offer. I know the equations, the calculations, something as small as what they look for in a medical document. We're looking for one word at times just to justify the value of the file. So these are things that you will never learn unless you're actually in that field. And I think it gives us a huge advantage. And I think that our clients can see that through the results that we get.
I've already seen the advantage that you bring too, because even just recently on a file where we were having a team meeting discussing settlement value or whether to take it to a hearing, and you brought the perspective of how the big insurance companies would have evaluated the damages in that particular case, and you ran some calculations. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So depending on the insurance companies, there are different equations that are used. Some of them are super simple and some of them are quite complex. Because of the way I am, and I like to be very thorough, I like to use the more complicated equations. But again, this is not an equation anyone would know unless you're in it. It's not a company secret, but because of the complexity, you need to be working within it to understand the value of the equation itself and exactly what it's telling you. Because you can punch numbers into an equation and have something get pumped out, but you have to also understand the little nuances within that equation of what does this mean if the amount of years changes or the age of the client is different. And it's quite complex in terms of the calculations, but I agree, this is invaluable information that I'm really glad that we have.
It's interesting because using that information and knowing, okay, this is the lens that the insurance company will look through, really empowers us and our clients to make sure that they do all of the right things to put their case in the best position, that even through that lens, that ultimately they can get a fair result and a fair value for their case.
We have a unique perspective because we can see where the holes are. It's very easy as a previous insurance defense lawyer for me to come on a file and say, well, we're lacking in this. Let it be medical documentation. Let it be specific reports. Because I know exactly what insurance companies are looking for in order to value the file. So realistically speaking, if you can catch these holes and problems early on as you work on the file, you can really put your best foot forward and make sure that your client is represented in the way that they should be.
We're talking about personal injury, but also you bring a unique skill set to our firm in terms of employment as well. Tell me about how you see the overlap or the interplay between practicing as a personal injury lawyer and also representing employees that were terminated unjustly from their job.
There is quite a lot of overlap, actually. For example, let's say a client was in a car accident and they're no longer able to go to work and their employer refuses to accommodate them. So we can step in and say, just so you know, like this is something that a lot of lay people don't understand. They don't know their rights. We can step in and actually save them from being what I call double burdened. Not only are you suffering from this injury that you had in a car accident, but now you're suffering at work or you are right about to get fired from work because of something that's completely out of your control. So as a personal injury lawyer who also knows employment law and practices employment law, I could actually advise you on the steps moving forward while simultaneously handling your personal injury claim.
What's your favorite part now that you've transitioned from insurance defense, defending big corporations, to now representing injured people or employees against large corporations, let's say in insurance companies? Is there like a best part for you? What's your favorite part of that?
For me, my favorite part has to be seeing the legitimate impact that I have. So when I worked in insurance defense, you would get a pat on the back if you settled a file well or if you won in a hearing, but it was just about that, right? There was always another file to attend to. You never really see these people, and of course you're communicating with your adjusters, but there's very much a lack of human interaction in that way. However, I found with personal injury and employment law, I'm directly facing people who are going through something traumatic. And I see my job, of course, as a lawyer in terms of a label, but one of the hats I wear is a therapist. It is my job to now absorb your anxiety, and I can see the impact that that has on that person. They come in with their shoulders drooped down and the weight of the world on them. And when I tell them, hey, listen, I got it, don't worry about it, I can see their eyes light up because that's what they're looking for, truly. A lot of people are not just looking for a settlement. They're looking for help. They need an ounce of human kindness.
Yeah, and they need to understand someone's got their back. They can focus on their recovery. They can focus on their health. Their lawyer and their lawyer's team can focus on navigating the complexities of the insurance claim or the lawsuit or whatever it might be.
You can say the accident took away their ability to walk, their ability to drive, but at least we give them an opportunity to go on with the rest of their lives, at the very least not dealing with the legal side of the problem.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that surprise you about personal injury law coming from the defense side? What are some of the differences you've seen even in the firm or just the nature of the practice that you find like surprising?
I think the biggest difference that I've found when I transitioned over from insurance defense to personal injury is the intentions. Insurance companies will basically try their very best not to pay you, right? And it's just for the sole reason of saving money. Whereas here, when you work in personal injury, we work not for a settlement, but we work so you can get your life back, so you can be a father, a mother again, so you can be that friend that your friends have been missing. And another aspect of that also is the creativity, where in personal injury, you have a narrative. You're able to build a narrative because you humanize your client. That person was a real person before, and they're a different person now. It allows me to advocate for them in a way that I couldn't in insurance defense. For example, I'm able to look into their backstory a little bit more. And for me personally, I like to look at any kind of engineering aspect. For example, if it's a slip and fall, I like to go over and beyond. And that's a capacity I wasn't able to do or allowed to do because insurance companies have quotas and they have their own internal guidelines on how things are done. Whereas here, you can literally pick up and paint the narrative that is honest and true to your client because each person is different. Not everybody is a father, not everybody is a mother, but if you don't allow that creativity to fall through, it just becomes a boilerplate situation and you cannot never win anything with something as vague and generic as that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's one of the things I'm always sharing with people too, is that it's like there's an art to it. It's a storytelling. It's learning about your client, learning about their friends, their family, what was important to them and what they've lost, and how's the best way to tell that story in a compelling and honest way.
Exactly.
from the time we've worked together, you've had opportunity to interview witnesses and family members, and I've learned that that's something that drives you.
Absolutely. There is something to be said about being able to see someone's face, either in person or on camera, and they tell you how this accident has impacted them. When I was practicing insurance defense, I just see you on paper and maybe once at the discovery. You can never translate true human emotion and the enormous impact something as traumatic as an accident had on you through paper. It is actually quite a disservice to the client and the plaintiff. And if insurance defense companies took a little bit more time to get to know the plaintiff, they would very much understand that.
And you touched on something else a moment ago, the science side to it. And there is a science side to it, particularly like on liability, fault, right? So lawyers use the phrase liability. For somebody watching that might not know, premises cases where you need engineers or accident reconstruction. I can tell that's the part that really gets you excited and you like to dig deep on the science. So tell us a little bit about that.
Slip and fall cases actually give us a really great opportunity to take it off the books. Of course, after a car accident, you can, see the site where the car accident happened, but there's nothing like, for example, going to a set of staircases. How is the lighting, right? There are bylaws and codes of the luminosity of the staircases. There are rules on the landing. There are rules on the color of each of the stairs. It's so complex. And of course, you should have an engineer to look over it after the fact. But it's quite, in my opinion, valuable for you to go there yourself, or that your lawyer to be somebody who wants to take that time to go there and really go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Because ultimately speaking, they are your biggest advocates. And imagine that your biggest advocate is going to where this accident happened, and they're going to be the ones that are telling your story. So if I'm telling your story, I think it's only right that I know the full story. And I'm there to experience it with you. Perhaps not when the accident happened, but at least after the fact, that's what I can provide.
That's a good point. So whether a lawyer cares enough, invests enough, and wants to actually look at the place where the accident happened or the injury happened, really try to identify what issues there might be, both in support of your case, but also from the perspective of someone who formerly defended those types of cases, to look for, okay, where are the weaknesses, where are the problems here, and how do we address those early on? As you mentioned, hire the appropriate engineers and be able to flag some of those issues, because as good as the engineers are, I still think, I agree with you, I think the lawyer also needs to be very active in looking at the evidence and asking the right questions.
People like engineers are your support. They are supposed to support something that you give foundation to. So if you yourself don't know the file, you don't know what's happening, you can't expect them to do the best job that they can. I don't think it's correct for you to, push aside your duties. I believe it's actually a duty of a lawyer to make sure that you know the file inside and out.
How do you keep yourself interested and motivated and inspired?
It's very simple in personal injury because each file is different. I almost see cases as a giant puzzle piece, and there is going to be something that is either missing or that I can pull out that is interesting, different, and that will really change the facts of the case for us. So for me, it is not a hard thing to do in terms of keeping interested in the file and, getting up every day and wanting to do the best. And again, for me though, on top of that is getting the results. There's nothing more beautiful than when a client comes in and says, hey, I feel a lot better because I can now actually go and get treatment because I was able to get a settlement and I got an appropriate amount of settlement so that I can actually feel confident in that I can feel better, because the mental game is half of it, right? Once someone feels like they were taken care of, they can thrive way more than someone who feels like they've been ignored and they have been just abused.
Yeah, I agree with that. I find that too. I've learned a lot about human beings from representing people who have been injured or through trauma. You learn a lot about their strengths, a lot about human weakness too, but more so about how resilient and strong people are.
Absolutely.
How did you determine you wanted to no longer represent insurance companies and start representing individuals? Was there a turning point for you?
I've always known I was going into personal injury. And over time, when I learned what different type of laws are and different type of lawyers, I realized, personal injury just fits me because it is a way that you can impact somebody in a really significant way, truly. Because of this knowledge that I had, I also knew that I wanted to be the most competent personal injury lawyer, which is why I decided to perhaps dabble into a little bit of insurance defense because I knew it was something in my back pocket, like a tool that I can use, and it's absolutely been the case. It is quite the tool that really helps me in my practice.
So are you saying even when you were representing insurance companies and defending these kinds of claims, even during that time, you knew in your heart that you were really a plaintiff's lawyer at heart?
Yes, even when I was practicing insurance defense, wherever I could get personal injury clients, I was getting them because I wanted to make the transition as streamlined as possible. Again, there is just no greater value than actually helping somebody as opposed to helping a $1 billion company save money.
Yeah,
There's no difference.
that's interesting because I've always said the same thing. I said, when I started in insurance defense, and I worked for a very large insurance defense firm in Florida, but even within that group, young associates defending insurance companies and defending claims, it was really obvious to me who was really an insurance defense lawyer at heart and who was really sympathized with the plaintiff and ultimately became lawyers representing plaintiffs. And there was a group of us that I'm still friends with to this day, still communicate on a regular basis, talk to about files. And it's interesting that the ones that shared that kind of similarity back then, even though we were very good, I think we were very good insurance defense lawyers, we all ultimately transitioned to representing people injured. And then there was another group that started with us that was to the core defense oriented. And they've remained and become partners at various insurance defense firms. So I think that's interesting because that was our view too, that we were really in there too for the education so that we could come out and be stronger advocates for injured people.
Absolutely. I mean, lawyers are not just cut from the same cloth, and it really depends on, your values and your intentions. Some people want to defend big insurance companies, and some people want to defend real people.
Yeah.
Just a big difference in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What would you be doing if you weren't the person injured, if you weren't a lawyer?
Um, I get asked this question a lot, and
Really?
I always have the same answer. I would not know. I would be lost. I wanted to be a lawyer since I was a kid, and it's just something I haven't turned my mind to in terms of what else I could be doing.
Are you glad you made that decision as a child, or do you think that if you could go back and talk to your child self, would you give yourself different advice?
If I could go back and talk to my younger self, no, I wouldn't change my advice. I mean, the one thing I would say is, study harder. You can always study harder. But in terms of going into law and becoming a personal injury lawyer, absolutely not. It's obviously a lot more work than I initially thought, but it is much more fulfilling. I mean, when I was a kid, I saw like the shiny lawyer on TV and I just thought that's what it was. But the fact that you get to work with real people and having coworkers that are supportive, which isn't always shown on TV, you're kind of a lone wolf most of the time where, you're fighting these battles and these trials by yourself. It's much better. You have a great support system, unlike depicted on TV.
More work than you thought. How so?
Well, on TV, the lawyers log off after 5. That's not always the case. But in terms of work, I don't just mean the hours. It is a lot of mental work. You are dealing with people's lives. If you don't get the results that you want for your client, it's difficult. So I think emotionally, it's a lot more difficult than people imagine. That's the thing. You just have to get up and keep going because the next person needs help. And, you learn the lessons from the last case and you apply it in the future to make sure that the ball gets rolling and you do the best that you absolutely can.
So what do you think the future holds for you?
I think that I have a very big growth mindset. I like growing. I like growing with people and I like to push people to grow with me. So ideally, I keep building up the practice here, both in employment and personal injury, and I become a really excellent trial lawyer.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, that's an important point because you have literally brought in the employment practice. Our firm didn't practice in employment law before you. You're heading up that whole side of things. How does that make you feel?
Honestly, I love it. I mean, I'm one of those people who works best under stress. And if I'm comfortable, I actually feel very uncomfortable. It's really a privilege because you're instilling a lot of trust in me, but it's also very exciting. We can build it up however we want and distinguish ourselves. That's a really interesting and exciting opportunity for us.
Yeah. And I really love the fact that it was your idea really to say, hey, there's an opportunity here to give more people access to justice and take on this employment matter on a contingency fee basis, which I'm learning through you is actually quite unique.
It is quite unique in the field of employment. It's very common to do hourly as opposed to contingency. But the reason I pushed for it really is because there is a huge issue with access to justice in employment. A lot of people can't afford, when they were just fired, to give out $5,000 or $10,000 just in chunk change. It doesn't work that way. If we offer them contingency, we are able to offer them the best service, but also service, period. And I think that is really important.
Do you think that that gives you an advantage against the opposing side as well, knowing that? Because I would think if I'm defending an employment law matter and there's this lawyer representing an employee that's doing it different than most lawyers, only getting paid if their client gets a fair result, do you think that also gives you an advantage in your ability to negotiate and push their case forward?
I think for some people, it could be the driving force that they need. For me, I think the advantage really lies in the fact that I can spend as much time as it is required on your file. Whereas if you're working hourly, you have to be mindful of the retainer, how much that person has and the trust. Realistically speaking, if something takes 10 hours, I'm going to take the 10 hours to make sure that the item gets done, the file gets to completion, and that the results are the best that they can be.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I've always said that too. I think that contingency fee really gives people access to a lawyer they might not otherwise be able to afford. They can choose the best lawyer for them. In my view, I really believe, like you said, lawyers working on a contingency fee, meaning they don't get paid unless they're successful in your case, I think they actually work harder. I think they put in way more hours.
And I think it also takes away from the mindset of like, when you're docketing, you're thinking about the time, the money. Whereas if you're working on contingency, you're focused on how is this person doing? How can I best serve my client? So the shift in focus is not so much chasing the hours, but it's chasing the legitimate results that actually mean something.
Yeah. Teresa, that was great. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed our conversation and learning more about your practice.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below, or please find us on our website or call us on our 24-hour hotline for both your employment and your personal injury needs. Thank you.